Okie dokie. Well, hello there, friends. Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Aleph, Daf 11, Masechta Hagiga. Friends, let me tell you. So, on Daf Yud of Masechta Hagiga, and there's a Mishnah Darton, and so that's sort of the subject matter of. So that's the subject matter of today's Daf. Is the new Mishnah that we get. It's not an interesting Mishnah. It talks about all sorts of things. Maybe let's just kind of jump into it. Alright, so let's jump in. So, we're on Daf Yud Amud Aleph, about 6 lines from the top. It says the Mishnah, Heter Nedarim Porchin Ba'avir. Alright, when it comes to Heter Nedarim, we can tell what Heter Nedarim is. So, like Kilu, before Rosh Hashanah, we try to do Torah Nedarim. It means that if a person made a vow, so you can go to a chacham, a expert, I guess, Tamar Chacham, I don't know, a scholar, to like permit it, to permit the vow. So the halachis of permitting vows, so porchin ba'aver, they're like, floating in the dust, in the air. Vein lo mamad sheyismuchu, and there's nothing to rely on. Right, the Gemara is going to sort of go into that a little bit. Hilchis Shabbos, when it comes to the halachis of Shabbos, Chagigis v'Me'ilis, as well as the Korban Hagiga, as well as the halachis of Me'ilah. We'll be talking what Me'ilah is, when you get benefit from Hekdesh. Sareim ka'arorim atluim b'saira. They are like mountains that are hanging from a thread, from a hair, right? Meaning there's like, a little bit in the Torah, but there's like lots and lots of details involved in these halachis. Shein mikra muat, there's just a little bit written about them in the Torah, halachis merubas, but there's lots and lots of nuances and halachis. Hadinan va'avodas va'atayris, judgments and like the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, atayris va'atmeis, things that are pure, things that are impure, va'arayis, as well as forbidden relationships. Yeshleina mashi yismuchu, they have what to rely upon. Ve'hein ein gufei Torah, and they are sort of the body of the Torah. Friends, clearly, there's some abstract concepts over here that require some delving into. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, Yeshloim amashi yismechu. Right, what is the Mishnah? The Mishnah had said, Heter Nedarim, that when it comes to permitting vows, so porchin ba'aver, they're like, flying in the air, vein loim amashi yismechu. They don't have anything to rely upon. We learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. He says, we do have what to rely upon. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, ki afli shtei paimim. The pasuk says in the context of arochin, right, evaluating things to donate to the temple, and also by a nazir. So it says ki yafli, right, that you'll basically make a commitment to do these things, and it says ki yafli 2 times, right? Yafli, as Rashi says, is like references to set aside and to commit that you're going to do something. So achas hafloya le'isav, achas hafloya leheter. So one of them is to say, okay, I'm not going to do something, right? I'm going to become a nazir. I'm not going to drink wine. I'm not going to, be tumei meis, any of these things. But then there's hafloya leheter, and then the second kiyafli is to say that, well, if you accepted something upon yourself, but you didn't quite realize how difficult it was going to be, or the extent of what you accepted upon yourself, right? And then it turns out that there were parts of your commitment that you really didn't intend to do. So then you can go to a scholar, and he could say, okay, well, this wasn't exactly what you intended to do, and he could permit it. All right, fine. So, okay, so there you have it. You have psukim from which we learn Hataras Nedar. Rabbi Yoshua says, Rabbi Yoshua Yeshloim Amashi Yismchu Shenamar. Rabbi Yoshua says that Hataras Nedar has what to rely upon, as the pasuk says in Tilim, Asher Nishbaiti Ba'api. That the Eibishter says that he swore in his anger. Ba'api Nishbaiti V'chazarti. That says Rabbi Yoshua that God is saying that he swore in his anger, but then when he wasn't angry anymore, he retracted. He retracted from what he swore upon. So you see that there is the possibility of permitting your vow. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Rabbi Yitzchak yesh lamamashi sheismchu, you have what to rely upon. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, kol nedivlev. It says by the donations to the tabernacle, it says everybody who their heart sort of, was benevolent. Whoever's heart was sort of, benevolent and committed, so they donated to the tabernacle. But if your heart was no longer committed, so then you didn't have to donate to the tabernacle. So again, we see that there is the option for permitting a commitment. Hananiah ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, Omer says, Hananiah, the son of the brother of Rabbi Yeshua, Yesh loim amashi yismachu, there is what to rely upon by het nedarim, ataras nedarim, shenemar, the pasuk says, Nishbaiti v'kayem l'ishmor mishpatei tzidkech, that I swore and I will fulfill to, right, it said not just that I swore, but also I will fulfill to guard your righteous statutes, i.e., implying that there is the possibility of also not fulfilling it. Alright, fine. Very good. Right, as Rashi says, from the fact that it says that I will fulfill it, implies that there is the possibility of maybe also not fulfilling it. Amr Rav Yehuda, says the Gemara, that says Rav Yehuda and Amr Shmuel, the name of Shmuel, Yavoy awesome, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, that if he was there, Amrilu, I would say to them, Didi adifim mididchu, that my proof, my basis is stronger than yours. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Lo yachil dvaro. And what does the pasuk say? It says, Ish kidor neder l'Hashem. Right, a fellow makes a commitment to God, or ishav a shvur, or he makes a swear. Leser isa anashro lo yachil dvaro. Right, he should not make profane his word. I.e., if he says he's going to do something, he has to stick to it. Hu enu mochel, aval acher mochalan lo. But right, it says, okay, he cannot make profane his word, but other people can undo his word. Other people could be matir his nether. So we see 5 different examples of actually how ataras nedarim, there is a basis for it in scripture. Amar Rava, says Rava, says Rava, that you can ask questions on everybody's suggestions, on everybody's proofs, and everybody's basis, with the exception being Shmuel. There's no questions you can ask on Shmuel's opinion of lo yachil devar deleis leipercha. There's nothing to ask on his opinion. Dimi Rabbi Eliezer, because if we use Rabbi Eliezer's proof, which is kiyafli kiyafi, it says it twice. Once to say that a person makes it asur, and then to say that he goes to a chacham to make it mutter. Demukid Rabbi Yehuda. Well, maybe it's like Rabbi Yehuda Sham Mishum Reb Tarfon, that he says in the name of Reb Tarfon. The Tanya is learned by Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Reb Tarfon. Says Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Reb Tarfon. La'olam ein echod meim nazir. Now we've seen this before. Where did we see this? We saw this in Masechta Eruvin, apparently, Daf Pei Beis. Alright, sounds like a lot of fun. That if you have Givaldig, if you have 2 Nazirs, scratch that. You have 2 individuals, okay? Let's call them Reuven and Shimon. You have Reuven, you have Shimon. And guess who walks by? Levi. So Reuven and Shimon are sitting, and what are they doing? What are Reuven and Shimon doing? They're drinking coffee. Okay, Reuven and Shimon are sitting, they're drinking coffee, alright. And then Levi walks by, alright. Reuven says to Shimon, he says, Shimon, if Levi is a Nazir, I'm going to be a Nazir. Alright, fine, what do I mean to tell you? And you know what Shimon says? The exact opposite. If Levi is not a Nazir, I'm a Nazir. So now, friends, Memele, Levi either is or isn't a Nazir, which means that one of them, either Reuven or Shimon, is gonna have to face the music and be a Nazir. Now, the thing is, says Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Reb Tarfon, La'olam, I'm going to read that again, Ein echad me'em Nazir. Neither one of them, neither Reuven nor Shimon, will be a Nazir. Because to become a Nazir, you have to be specific. You have to be specific. You can't become a Nazir out of Suffolk, right? And when it comes, right, and both Reuven and Shimon's statements were right, made out of doubt, out of uncertainty, because at the time that they made the statement, they didn't know if Levi was a Nazir or not. Imid Rabbi Yeshua. Now, okay, so that's the question on Rabbi Eliezer. Because Rabbi Eliezer requires both kiyaflis in order to learn Ataras Nadarim, but maybe one of the kiyaflis is like Rabbi Yehuda and the name of Rabbi Tarfon, that you have to be specific when you become a Nazir. If we use Rabbi Yeshua's proof of Asher Nishbaiti Ba'api, that God swears out of anger, but then when he was no longer angry, he kind of took it back. So, Dilma Achi Ka'amar, this is maybe what it means, Ba'api Nishbaiti V'lo Adar Nabi. Maybe it's Taka, the Eibishter swore out of anger and he never retracted. I don't know, who's to say that he certainly retracted? Imid Rabbi Yeshua. And Imid Rabbi Yitzchak, if we learn from Rabbi Yitzchak's proof of Kol Nediv Lev, anybody whose heart sort of was committed. So, Dilma Lafukim Mid Shmuel, Damar Shmuel. Maybe it's the exclusion of Shmuel, that Shmuel says, Gomar Belibo Tzarech Shiotzi B'Sfasod. That Shmuel says, again, Gomar Belibo Tzarech Shiotzi B'Sfasod. That Shmuel says that if a fellow thought in his heart to do something, he needs to actually vocalize it and verbalize it. Whereas maybe you can learn out from the pasuk of Kol Nediv Lev, Kamashman, that it teaches us that Kol Nediv Lev, anybody whose heart sort of, brings him, commits him. So maybe you can learn from there. Not like Shmuel, right? That Shmuel says that you have to specifically mention in your heart. Maybe that you have to specifically mention it verbally. But maybe we can learn out from Kol Nediv Lev that actually your heart is enough. And if we want to learn from the pasuk of Hananya ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, which is, what was the last one? Who could tell me? Nishbaiti v'akayema, that I swore and I will keep it, I will fulfill it, from which we wanted to imply that, well, maybe you don't have to fulfill it, meaning he's saying, I will fulfill it, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe you could retract. But maybe it's like Rav Gidol Amarav, Damar of Gidol Amarav, how do you know that you're allowed to swear to make a shvua that you're going to do a mitzvah, to keep you committed to doing a mitzvah? Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Nishbaiti v'akayema, that I swore and I will fulfill, Lishmar mishpatei tzidkecha, to guard your righteous statutes. So we saw that by all of those opinions, let's see if I can remember them. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, Rabbi Hananya ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, and finally, who was the last one? Oh no, that was the last one. So who was the second to last one? Rabbi Yitzchak. So we said that all of them, you can ask kashas. Alright? But there's no kashas you can ask on Shmuel. It says, that he can't make profane his word, but other people can permit it, what is commitment. Rava, and says Rava, V'temer of Nachman bar Yitzchak, some takasi of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Hanadam Inshe. This is what the people say. Tavachad de popata charifto mimolei tzone dekari. That one charif, one pilpel charif. Who knows what a pilpel charif is? A hot pepper. That one hot pepper could be more significant than a whole basket full of gourds. Interesting. Yeah, interesting how that applies over here. But anyways, but there was all these opinions. Come Shmuel, and his, out of all the opinions, is the only one that sort of stands strong and you can't ask any questions against. Alright, moving on in the Mishnah. We had said in the Mishnah that Hilchas Shabbos is like Harorim Atluim B'Saira. Right, is like a mountain that is dangling by a hair. That they are not a lot of psukim, but a lot of halachis. So now, in fact, the Gemara Michtav Ksifon, to which the Gemara says, 1 second, do you really mean to say that the halachis of Shabbos they aren't written so much in the Torah? I mean, the halachis of Shabbos are plenty in the Torah. So lo tzricha lichad Reb Abba. The point of the hair and the mountain analogy is like Reb Abba, Dam Reb Abba. HaChofer Guma b'Shabbos. A fellow digs a hole in the earth on Shabbos. Ve'ein tzarich el afra, but he doesn't need the hole. He needs the dirt. Potter alel, he's potter. A fellow digs a hole in the ground. Normally it would be bone. Normally it would be constructing something. He's constructing a hole. But he doesn't need the hole. He just needs the dirt. So potter. Potter. That's what Rabbi Abba says. Kiman Reb Shimon. So that sounds like Reb Shimon. That Reb Shimon says that a malacha that is not needed for the thing itself, i.e., he's digging a hole, but he doesn't need the hole. He needs the dirt. So the fact that he's digging a hole is not important, and he's potter. Afilu Teim Rabbi Yehuda, and we say, okay, you can even say that it's Rabbi Yehuda, Hosum Misakin, Hosum Makalkalu. So over there, it's meaning in general so where's over there? So the example where Reb Shimon says, is potter, is if a person passes away, so taking out the nifter, taking out the bed with the nifter on Shabbos, you're going to be potter because, you didn't want the person to pass away. So therefore the fact that, hotzah is a melacha she'ein tzrich l'gufa, you don't need the hotzah, right? Ideally, you wouldn't be doing the hotzah in the first place, because the person would still be alive. So therefore he's potter. Now says Rabbi Yehuda that, well, in that case though, it's misakin. In that case, you're burying somebody. You're taking him out to bury. So there's a positive action, a positive activity that's happening. Whereas over here, he's doing a destructive action, right? He's making a hole in the ground. So therefore, even Rabbi Yehuda would say that he's going to be potter in that case. Okay, so there's an example of something, of a halacha on Shabbos that isn't necessarily written explicitly in the Torah. In fact, the Gemara, okay, so what was the metaphor? The metaphor was a mountain that is dangling on a hair. I.e., there's a lot of halachas, such as melacha she'ein tzrich l'gufa, or kol mekalklin p'turin. So there's all these halachas, and they're like dangling on a hair, i.e., there's like a small oh gosh, what's the word I'm thinking of? Allusion, I guess, to this halacha, but all these other halachas come from it. So what is sort of the reference, I guess, to this halacha in the Torah? So meleches machshavas asur Torah, meleches machshavas lo ksiva. So meleches machshavas is really written in the context of the Mishkan, but because the Mishkan is compared to Shabbos, so therefore we apply it to Shabbos as well. So it's not written sort of explicitly in the context of Shabbos, but we learn about meleches machshavas. So you have to have intention to do a melacha on Shabbos in order to be chayiv, and that is sort of alluded to in the Torah because it doesn't say explicitly in the context of Shabbos. It says in the context of the Mishkan, and we then apply it to Shabbos. So that is the allusion, that is the reference to melacha she'ein tzrich l'gufa, or kol mekalklin p'turin, in the Torah. Okay. Moving on in the Mishnah. Chagigis. Alright. So we had said in the Mishnah that Hagiga is also an example of something that is sort of alluded to in the scripture, but we have all these but there's like a lot more than meets the eye, right? There's all these, a mountain of halachas hanging on a thread. On a hair. So Michtav Ksivan, to which the Gemara says, 1 second. Hagiga is written in the right. We say V'chagosim osu chag l'Hashem, from which we learn out the Korban Hagiga. So friends, over here we might have a shtickle spaghetti. I don't think it's not like shtickle spaghetti. Shtickle. So Michtav Ksivan. So we say, well, the Hagiga, V'chagosim osu chag l'Hashem, the Korban Hagiga is written in the Torah. So well, it's like Rav Papa says to Abaye, "Mimaydai v'chagosem osu chag la'Hashem zvicha dilma chogu chaga kol merachmon." Rav Papa asks Abaye, he says, "Wait a second. How do we know that v'chagosem osu chag la'Hashem is referring to the Korban Chagiga? Dilma chogu chaga kol merachmon. Maybe what the Torah is saying is, enjoy yourselves, have a good time." Have a festival. Make it leibedik. But not necessarily to bring korbanis. So who? To which the Gemara says, wait a second. It also says a similar lashon by when Moshe Rabbeinu says to Paro, he says, right, free wait, let's take a look at this pasuk for a second. That so says God, the God of Israel, send my nation and they will, v'achoguli b'midbar. And the question is, what does v'achogu mean? Does it mean to offer korbanos? Does it mean to just have a good time? So are you going to suggest that v'achoguli b'midbar is also enjoy yourselves, have a good time? If you're going to say, sure, yeah, it means have a good time. But Moshe Rabbeinu says to Paro, he says, you're going to give us animals to sacrifice. So doesn't that memela then mean that v'achoguli b'midbar means that there's going to be korbanos? So v'achoguli b'midbar means korbanos, so then memela v'chagos moso chag la'Hashem also means korbanos. So dilma achi ka'amar. So maybe this is what it means. Maybe still, no, what the Torah is saying. Ichlu ushisu v'chogu chogo kamoy. Kilu, eat and drink, and also have a good time. Kilu, the animals are not necessarily for korbanos, they're to have meat to eat. So ichlu ushisu, eat and drink, and eat the animals, but not necessarily korbanos per se. V'chogu chogo kamoy, and at the same time also have a good time, but not necessarily korbanos. Lo sakadaitich, no, don't say that. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, v'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boker. It says that you shouldn't leave over the chelev of chagi, of my chag, until the morning. V'sakadaitich dechogu chogahu, and if it enters your mind that chag just means to have a good time, tarbil choga islay. What does having a good time have fat? Right? It says, right, don't leave over any of the fats till the morning. Does having a good time have fat? I don't know, you tell me. Maybe there are people here who are more accustomed to having a good time than I am. But my understanding and the understanding of the Gemara is that having a good time doesn't have fat. So vidilma achi kam rachmana. But still, maybe what the Torah is saying is chelev abba bizman chag lo yolin. Maybe what the Torah is saying, not necessarily that chag means you have to bring a korban chagiga. Maybe it means that chag means have a good time. And what it means is that the fats of the animals that you offer while you're having a good time, that you offer on the festivals, do not leave over till the morning, right? A person makes a commitment to the Beis HaMikdash, he's going to offer a korban, a neder, a nedava. So I think it was common that you would wait until the Shalosh Regalim, when you were coming to Jerusalem anyways, and you would offer it then. So maybe what the Torah is saying is that no, chag means to just have a good time, not necessarily a korban chagiga. And what the Torah is saying, v'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boker, it means that, where am I? Maybe it means that chelev habab is man chag lo yolin. That if you bring Nadar min Nadavis, forget about the Korban Chagiga, if you bring Nadar min Nadavis on the Chag, when you're having a good time in the Shalosh Regalim, so then don't leave the fats until the morning. Okay, fine. Elamiata. Habab is man Chag lo yolin. Haduchal Hashana kula yolin. But one second, does that imply that Nadar min Nadavos that you offer on the Shalosh Regalim, so then don't leave anything over, don't leave any of the fats over until the morning? Right? You have to burn them during the night. So that only applies to Nidar min Nidavos that are offered in Shalosh Regalim. That the Nidar min Nidavos that you bring on the Shalosh Regalim, you can't leave over the fats until the morning without burning them. What about the rest of the year? Doesn't the pasuk say that you need to that you could burn all the fats in the limbs all the night until the morning, but not in the morning? So therefore, how could it be that lo yolin chelev chagi ad boker is specifically referring to Nadar min Nadavis of the Shalosh Regalim, but that would imply that the rest of the year you don't need to, right? You can leave the fats until the morning, but we know that that's not true, as the pasuk says, kol laila ad boker, that you can only burn the korban until the morning, not after the morning. So Dilma imeahu avaminahu le'eseh. So the Gemara says, well, maybe you could say that Kol Halayla Ad HaBoker is a mitzvah saseh. Because of Achmona Hai Lilav. And therefore it says, Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi Ad Boker, to say that not only are you violating, being Mevato mitzvahs essay, but you're also violating a mitzvahs lo saseh. So maybe again, Chag just means enjoying yourself. It says, Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi Ad Boker, that the fats of the Nidarim and Nidavos that you offer on the Shalosh Regalim don't leave until the morning. We already know that from the pasuk of Kol Halayla Ad HaBoker. No, that pasuk is just teaching us a mitzvahs essay. Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi is teaching a mitzvahs lo saseh when it comes to Nidarim and Nidavos, but we don't necessarily have a pasuk for Hagiga. But Lilav, if we're saying Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi Ad HaBoker is to teach us the mitzvahs lo saseh, because of Kra'acharina, we already have a different pasuk which teaches us the mitzvahs lo saseh. V'lo Yolin min ha'basar asher tizbach be'erev bayom harishon laboker. That you cannot leave over any of the meat that from, right, this is talking about, I believe, the Korban Pesach, or V'leirah l'chasor b'chol gvulcha b'shivas yom, v'lo min ha'basar shetizbach be'erev bayom rishon laboker. Right, the Korban Pesach, do not leave over till the morning. So we already have a lo saseh when it comes to leaving over meat until the morning. So, v'dilma lav or olav b'shnei lav b'eseh, but again, still, maybe it's saying that if you leave over the fats till the morning, you're violating 2 lavs and mitzvah lo saseh, so it's really, really bad. Alright, fine, very nice. So if that's the case, so then it sounds like Chag might just mean having a good time, and it might not necessarily mean Chagiga. Se'ela aser midbar. We say, no, one second. We have a Gzeir Shava. It says midbar by v'yachoguli b'midbar. And it also says midbar. Right, let's see. It says by Chag that you will have a Chag in the Midbar. And it says, did you offer any sacrifices and flower offerings when you were in the desert? Just like when it says Midbar, desert, in that pasuk, where is it? In Yirmiyah? In Amos. So it says, when it says desert in Amos, it refers to Korbanos. So also V'chogli B'midbar means specifically Korbanos. Umay ka'arorin atlim b'sayra. Okay, so if that's the case, that we actually have a Gzeir Shava to teach us that the Chagiga, right, that there's to learn that about the Korban Chagiga. If that's the case, then what does it mean that it's like a mountain that's hanging on a hair? I.e., that there's not too much, it's not really referenced in the Torah. It's really, right, there's all these halachas, even though it's not really referenced in the Torah, but it sounds like we have a Gzeir Shava, which is a pretty strong proof. So, and for the Gemara, Divrei Torah, Divrei Kabbalah, Lo Yalfinon. Well, the pasuk in Amos is from the Navi, whereas the Korban Chagiga is Midoraisa, is from the Torah, right? V'yachoguli b'midbar is a pasuk in the Torah, and Azvachim mincha igashtem li Bamidbar is a pasuk in the Navi, and we don't learn out psukim in the Torah from psukim in Navi, and that is why it's really just like, a reference in the Torah, but it's not kilu, as though we're like learning it out as if it's written directly in the Torah, because we're learning out something in the Torah from Navi, and that's what makes it sort of like a mountain hanging on a hair. Moving on in the Mishnah, Me'ilos. Okay, so we say also that Me'ilah, right? Me'ilah is when you get benefit from, something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. So you have to, if it's by accident, you bring an Osher Me'ilos, you have to bring a Korban, you have to pay the value plus a fifth. So Michtav Ksivan, so that as well, it's written in the Torah. Me'ilah is written in the Torah. What does the pasuk say? It says Nefesh Kisimo Mal, right? It talks about a person, he's Mal. Me'ilah. So it says Rambam Bar Chama, well, the interesting halachis over here that I wouldn't have known otherwise, just strictly speaking from the Torah, is, for example, like we have in a Mishnah, Hashaliach she'asu shlichuso, balabayis ma, lo asu shlichuso shliach ma. That, for example, if you have a balabayis, you have a homeowner, and he's got some money, Baruch Hashem, but that money gets mixed together with his other money, right? So meaning he has some money that's hektish, that's consecrated, and it gets mixed together with his other money, and he makes a mistake, and he sends a messenger with the consecrated money to buy epis, to buy clothing or something like that. So we're saying that hashaliach she'asa shlichuso. So if the balabayis sent a messenger with this money of hektish inadvertently, and he says, "Hey, messenger, can you buy me some clothing?" So hashaliach she'asa shlichuso. If the messenger then goes and he does what he was instructed to do and he purchases the clothing, balabayis mo'al. So then the sender, the balabayis, is liable for me'ilah. He has to pay keren v'chomesh for the principal plus a fifth. He also needs to bring a korban asher me'ilos. Lo asa shlichuso shaliach ma. But if the messenger did not do what he was sent to do, so then the messenger is liable for bringing for whatever the consequences of me'ilah, or whatever the keren v'chomesh, the korban asher. The messenger needs to do it if he didn't, stick to the message, to the mission he was sent on. Now, we just said that if the messenger does what he was sent to do, so then the sender is going to be, it has to deal with the me'ilah liability. But how come? Amai mo'al. How come he was mo'al? When do we ever have a situation that, one person sins and the other person is chayiv, right? There is a concept of ein shliach l'dvar avera, that there is no messenger when it comes to an avera, right? That if the messenger sins, so he's liable for it. So so in general we have this principle of ein shlichus l'dvar avera. Ein shliach l'dvar avera, there's no concept of a messenger to do an avera. The person who does the avera is himself liable. So how could it be that if the messenger is doing his mission in this case, and he buys the clothing with this hektish money, how could it be that the sender is the one who's liable? Shouldn't it be that the messenger who did it is liable? So this is why we say that yes, even though there's a pasuk that mentions me'ilah in the Torah, however, the sort of details of me'ilah, such as that if a balabayis sends the messenger and the messenger does what he was told to do, the balabayis is the one who's chayiv, that is something that I would not have necessarily thought. And that's what it means, that it's like there's a mountain of halachis hanging on a hair. Oh my Rava. But Rava challenges. Umay kusha. 1 second. What's so crazy about this case? One second. Maybe it actually isn't the craziest thing ever that the shliach is doing what he was sent to do, and yet the balabayis is going to be chayiv. Because after all, we learn out me'ilah, there's a gzera shav between, right? It says chet by me'ilah, it says chet by truma. So we learn out that mahosam, just like by truma, shlucho shel adam kamoso, a person's messenger is like him, that I could send somebody to separate truma for me. So avkan shlucho shel adam kamoso. So also here, when it comes to right here too, when it comes to me'ilah, the person that is sent is like the sender, and that is why if the messenger does what he was sent to do, the sender is going to be liable, because we'll say, just like by truma, shlucho shel adam kamoso, that a person's messenger is like him, and therefore it's like he, the balabayis, is the one who is over me'ilah, and he therefore has to, keren v'chomesh and korban asher me'ilos. Elo amarava, rather says Rava l'nitzcha el l'chidetanya. Alright, so when we say that it's like a mountain that's hanging on a hair, it's like the following brisa: nizka balabayis v'lo nizka shaliach. What if the sender, the balabayis, remembers after he sends the messenger, he says, oy va'avoy, that money that I sent with him is taka hektish. That's a problem. So in Memele, he doesn't anymore want to be sending this messenger, if he doesn't want it to be his messenger anymore. So nisko balabais v'lo nisko shaliach, if the sender remembers that, this was hektish money, but the messenger doesn't remember that, so he's unaware of that. So shaliach mo'al, so in that case, the shaliach is going to be liable, and the shaliach is going to have to pay keren v'chomesh and an asher me'ilos. Shaliach anya, maika ovid, and poor messenger. After all, what did he do wrong? He was just innocently going to buy some clothing for somebody, and now he's stuck with Karen V'chomesh and an Osher Me'ilos, Hanu Karor and Atzluim B'Saira. This is what is meant by a mountain dangling by a hair, that it's something that sort of is not necessarily something that you would think, right? Meaning, poor messenger, all of a sudden he's chayiv for this thing, but nonetheless, that is the case. Amar Rav Ashi, my kusha. To which Rav Ashi says, wait, but maybe that's also not so crazy. Because after all, sure, poor messenger. At the end of the day, what happened? There was money of hektish that now was used to buy clothing, and it became chulin, became just regular, it lost its status of hektish. And that's exactly the case of me'ilah. That's exactly a situation where you would be liable to me'ilah. So why is that so crazy? So Rav Ashi rather says, Rav Ashi lo nitzcha ela. What's the situation of like a mountain hanging on a hair? It's like we learn in a Mishnah. Natol Evin or Korah shel hektish. If a fellow took a stone or a beam of hektish, hareze lo mo'al. Okay, so he's not mo'il, right? He took a beam, took a stone of hektish. Okay, he's not yet over on me'ilah. Nosna lachavero, but if he transfers it to his friend, huma v'chavero lo mo'al. Well, then he is liable for me'ilah. His friend is not liable for me'ilah. Michdei mishkal shakla mali hu mali chavero. To which we say, 1 second. But at the end of the day, he took the thing and he transferred it to his friend. What's the difference if he has it or if his friend has it? Why should he be the one who's liable to me'ilah? Hainu karar and atzluim b'sayra, and this is what it means that the mountain, it's like a mountain dangling on a hair. Umay kusha, to which the Gemara says, but still, what exactly is the question there? Dilma kid de Shmuel. Maybe it's like Shmuel says, Damar Shmuel, Hacha begizbur amasuros lo avne binan askina. Here we're talking about the temple treasurer, that the stones of building are sort of in his domain. And they're, like for the temple treasurer to pick up a stone or a beam, it still remains within hektish, it still remains within the treasury. That wherever it is, it's his. So kilu, when he picks it up, it was his before he picked it up, it's his, it continues to be his. But when he gives it to his friend, then he takes it from being in the kedusha of the temple treasury, and he's now releasing it from there and giving it to his friend. And maybe that is why, at that point, he is chayiv on me'ilah. So elam seifa. So rather so it's not so crazy to think that he would be over me'ilah. So rather, the mountain dangling from the hair comes from the second part of that Mishnah, which is banoah b'soch beiso, that if the treasurer were to build it into his house, hareze lo mo'al, then he is not over on me'ilah ad sheyidur tachtea b'shvei pruta, until he lives under the beam and gets benefit of a shavet pruta. So the temple treasurer, if he takes it, we said he's not over on me'ilah. But if he builds it into his house, he's still not over on me'ilah until he then gets benefit equal to a shavet pruta, then he's chayav me'ilah. But Michte, the Gemara says, I don't understand. Shanuye Shanya. He built it into his house. He made a shinu. He made a change to this beam or this stone. It's now part of his house. So Mali Dar Umali Lodar. So who cares if he lived under it and got benefit equal to a shavet pruta? Fact of the matter is, he made a substantive change to this stone or to this beam. Memele, he should be over on me'ilah, even if he doesn't then later get benefit under this beam. And this is what is meant by a mountain that's dangling on a hair, i.e., this is not necessarily what you would think, and yet this is nonetheless a halacha when it comes to me'ilah, that even though he builds it into his house, he's not chayiv until he gets benefit from it. Umay kusha. To which the Gemara says, wait, but why is it necessarily a problem? Maybe it's logical, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's like Rav says. For example, if he took the beam and he didn't build it into his house, he just put it to cover his window. And therefore, he didn't make a substantive change to the item. He literally just put it down on top of an opening. Idarba in, ilo darbe lo. And therefore, it makes sense to say that if after just placing it on top of a window, which doesn't make a substantive difference in the beam or the stone, he then gets benefit from it. At that point, he's going to be chayiv. He's going to be over on me'ilah, which makes sense. It's logical. El olam kiderava. So rather, it's like what Rava says, that if the Balabai sends the messenger and then he realizes after he sends the messenger that oops, I sent him with hektish, and therefore he no longer wants him to be his messenger, so the messenger is chayiv. So the kakashlach midida v'amotzi mo's hektish l'chun. If you're going to ask like Rav Ashi asked it, but what's the big chiddush? The messenger is literally just taking hektish and making a chulin. Obviously, he's going to be chayiv. So also made the yoda the kazuze the hektish iboyilei le'ayune. Hachom yoda. He says, yeah, but there's a big difference. In general, if a person knows that the money that he's working with, that he has, is hektish, and he makes a mistake and accidentally makes it chulin, okay, so he has to bring so he's over on me'ilah. It's chayiv me'ilah. For me'ilah. The chiddush over here is that the messenger didn't even know. Hacha miyada, here the messenger didn't even know that he had hektish, and still he's going to be chayiv for me'ilah. That is hainu karon atzlim b'saira. That is what is meant by like a mountain dangling by a hair, that there's all these halachas that you wouldn't necessarily think, but they nonetheless apply. Friends, that was Daf Yud of Masechta Hagiga. We started a new Mishnah that says that there's these different halachas that have either no basis in the Torah or have kind of sort of a reference in the Torah, but they're not well defined. We started with Hataras Nedarim, to which the Gemara actually gave all sorts of ways that Hataras Nedarim actually is referenced in the Torah. For example, it says Ki Yafli twice, or for example, it says Asher Nishbati Ba'api, or Kol Nediv Lev, or Nishbati Vakayema. We ultimately said that the strongest one is Shmuel's opinion, which is Lo Yochel Dvar. Says that he cannot make profane his word, but other people could undo his word. So we see actually that there are some references in the Torah for Hataras Nedarim. We said also that Hilchos Shabbos is not so well documented in the Torah, to which you say, what do you mean? There's plenty of speak about Hilchos Shabbos in the Torah, to which we say that, well, things like Meleches Machsheves are things that are sort of referenced in the Torah, that you have to have intention to do a malacha. That is referenced in the Torah, sort of, but not explicitly. It's learned through the Mishkan, which is juxtaposed to Shabbos. We learned from Hagiga. Ultimately, we said that Hagiga is referenced in the Torah through a Gezerah Shava from the Navi, which is not the strongest Gezerah Shava from Torah to, from Navi to Torah, between Navi and Torah. So therefore, it's just kind of, like a reference. And then finally, we said that when it comes to Me'ilah also, there are things that I would not necessarily, that are sort of atypical, things that I would not necessarily have thought when it comes to Me'ilah. Ultimately, we said that, for example, if you have a messenger that sends, that if you have somebody who sends a messenger to buy something with hektish money, then he realizes in the middle that it's not, that it's hektish, and therefore he doesn't want to send the messenger anymore. The messenger in the meantime has no clue that it's hektish to begin with. Nonetheless, the messenger is going to be chayiv. We said that is something that you would not have you wouldn't assume to be the case, and that's what it means, that it's like a mountain hanging on a hair. Friends, that was Daf Yud of Masechta Hagiga. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.